This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.
As far back as I can remember, I was inking myself. And I've given a lot of thought to that. I mean, I started with an interest in animation. I mean, you start with line, drawing with line. And I guess the way my mind works is I'm always trying to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So when it comes to art, I really have spent a lot of time analyzing my work, the what, the how, the why, and all that stuff. And it led me to teaching for a long time, as I've said. And so yeah, I spent a long time on this journey of figuring out what line was. And that's why the first Inkpulp Instruction video is online. I feel like it's a very basic tenement of art, but it's so important to understand. I see so many drawings that could simply be fixed from like people who send me work, or when I do portfolio reviews at conventions, just through a simple understanding of what line is. And for myself, I find that it's really important to go back to the basics a lot to reinforce your ideas. I mean, I think you should break the rules. I think you got to understand the rules in order to break them. So, yeah, it just set me down this path, and that got me into inking. And you know, I always used black line in my artwork, whether it be the cartoons I drew as a kid or the graffiti I got into when I was older. Everything was contained with line. And then as I studied art and went on to become a professional in art, I really spent a lot of time practicing with line. And today's podcast is me inking a Hellboy commission that I received. I didn't draw it. Mignola drew it. The creator of Hellboy was commissioned to do a pencil bust of Hellboy. And the commissioner wanted to get it inked, so he reached out to me. I assume because we had been doing that on the podcast a bit. But yeah, I love inking. Anyone, especially Mike. So today I'm going to ink that on camera, and I'm going to talk as I go. It's not going to be a sped up version. This is a new thing. I'm really trying to do everything I can to bring more instruction into my presence in social media and podcasting, because it's so much a part of who I am, and it's why I started Inkpulp Instruction. So enjoy the podcast, and hopefully you learn a few things. And please, if you do, let me know. Reach out, like comment, like, hey, I learned this. And click the link in the little description down below. And go to my Indiegogo page, watch the video, and get yourself a copy. This is the beginning of something big, and I'm starting very small. I'd like you all to join me on this journey, and it's not just me. It's going to be teaching. Sorry, it's been a long day. It's not just going to be me that's teaching. It's going to be a whole mess of people. I've been going on and on about that, but I thought it'd be nice to bring some of my teaching side to you all, so you can see what it is you might be getting on that video when you go to my Indiegogo and get yourself a copy. All right, cool. If I'm very kind of calm right now, a bit low energy, just not hype, but I'm good. I just got a lot going on. I'm just staying even, vibing at a good frequency. So, thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, comment on this YouTube page. Click the Indiegogo and check that out. Get yourself a copy. Go over to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Inkpulp. Give me a follow. You know what? On Instagram, I get like this shadow ban thing a lot. I don't know why. I don't think I use the platform very well. I'm trying to be better. But I've learned that if more people favorite the piece, that's like a like on crack. I didn't know that. So start favoriting some of my shit. And that'll be good for me and you. I don't know how it'll be good for you, but it will be. I promise. I don't know. We'll see. Enjoy. Peace. Alright, hello. Welcome to the Inkpulp Podcast. I am Sean Crystal, but you probably know that. So today I'm going to try something a little different. Probably going to be doing more and more of these. I've been commissioned to ink this Hellboy drawing. From what I understand, the commissioner owns the original pencil drawing and sent me a scan. So I'm going to ink this and talk about what I'm doing and while I'm doing it as I go. So let's get started. I've got my brush. It's got some ink in it. Right now it's wetter than I would like it to be because I just dipped it in water. And it will dry over time. So what I'm going to look for, there are some solid blacks here, but I can see it's going to fade out as we get down into here. And there are some really nice textural mark making going on from Mignola. So I don't think I just want to jump in and make something black yet. I want to figure out as I go what I'm going to do with that texture. So I'm just going to look for somewhere I can make a big, bold black line that may not break up as much as I normally like it to. And look at that. It's dry enough. Lucky me. So the reason I'm thinking it's dry enough is because this ink concoction I use, I make up my ink using 2 other inks. So I have this like ink formula, and it gets to the bottom, it gets pretty thick, and so it tends to work really dry that way, but it also is a little trickier to navigate. So I am going to have a nice bold kind of dead weight black line, contour line on this, because I've been working that way recently and have been enjoying it, the results of it quite a bit. So I'm just gonna spend a little bit of time knocking some stuff out. So like in here, I think I'm definitely gonna probably go solid black. But you're seeing me pull the ink lines with my arm with a brush, which I love that I can do that now. I spent years never being able to do that. Having that level of kind of control and confidence. But I have it now, and I love the feel of it. And I'm just going to let the lines kind of fade off as we get to the bottom of this piece. Now, what I did up in here was I did some parallel hatch line work. And that I'm enjoying doing in my work. It allows the some light to creep into the darker areas. So if we think of things in terms of value, pitch black would be 100% dark. Pure light would be 0%. And I know Mignola typically works in those percentages exclusively. I do not. And I'm trying to bring some of that into his work. I think the key to that and what will make it work is if my darks stay minimally 70 or 75%, they have to be dark. If they become light grays, I don't think it'll work. It will become light gray as I get towards the bottom, but that's to achieve an effect of controlling the focus of the piece. It's nice working with dry brush because a little bump in a line can be fixed so easily just by going over it. So these little trim lines in here, I'm going to keep thin, just like that. And then you've got these marks he makes. In here, they're anatomical. In here, they're fabric. So I'm going to try to approach them differently. I'm going to do some mark making like this in the fabric, so it has a different texture in the flesh. And allow me to take off this bracelet because I can guess this is going to become an audio nightmare for you all, hearing it clanking and clicking against things. All right, let's get back into it. This shadow that is cast by the collar is an area I will probably go pure black in. And if you see me dipping a lot, again, I'm near the bottom of this batch of ink I made, so it's really thick. So it tends to not get soaked into the brush as well, and therefore you need to dip it more. Has its benefits, has its challenges, no matter what you're doing. That's kind of what's nice about inking. Traditionally there's nuance to every aspect of it, and you just kind of got to learn to roll with it and never kind of build your expectations to be in complete control. So here, this looks like a little droplet of maybe blood coming off of the tear. I'm assuming. I could be wrong. But it's not colored in black. This is. But I want to keep it fairly dry. I mean, it looks like a drop of blood, right? Should we do it? Maybe we should do it. Yeah, let's do it. Just looking at the piece now, I can see how a little solid area of black, maybe leave a little highlight in there. A little solid black area right there would be kind of nice. Alright, so here's a tear in the jacket. I'm going to go a little bolder there to separate it a bit. So these dry brush lines I'm getting, I enjoy how they almost look like chalk. There's a lot of character in it. I think, I've said before, and I can't imagine that anyone here might remember this. I don't know where I said it. I had gotten to a point with my work, with my ink work, with a brush where I was in really super control mode, and I was losing some of the energy of what I wanted from my work. And my inks became, I don't know, maybe almost vector-like. And that I didn't like. I think I remember people asking me, like, was that done digitally? And this is at a time where digital inks were not what they are now. They were much more vector looking. So I didn't like that. And I shouldn't say they became lifeless. There was some spring to the line still. There was a lot of good stuff hanging on. But I felt like I was missing something. I was missing some amount of, I didn't know what it was. And then I got this little Deadpool short story to do with Fabian, the creator of Deadpool, created it with Liefeld. It was a short story for Deadpool's wedding issue. And the very first panel I drew, there's this like giant talking head of Deadpool kind of introducing the story. And it must have been the first time I started using the really rough surface paper. And I was using a thinner ink, so I don't know how. I think I must have moved fast in some of the marks I made. And the lines started to break up. And it was like, I loved the look. All of a sudden, my line had like some texture to it that wasn't there before. It also had, like, I wasn't able to control where it broke up and where it didn't break up. And I felt like I'd stumbled into something really big. So I spent the rest of the story trying to recapture that, and I just couldn't get it. I mean, I'd hit it sometimes, but it was so haphazard that I really didn't know how I was going to do it. And so when I was done with the story, I did some testing and kind of asked myself, why did that happen? What did I like about that? What could have contributed to it? And I was using a very rough paper, so I knew that was part of it. And I also discovered, or realized, I was using a very thin ink, that maybe a thicker ink would do better. And the next thing I did, I don't remember what it was, but I remember pulling out my FW ink. Sorry, circles take some concentration. There. So I pulled out some FW ink, and lo and behold, it was much easier to capture that feeling. Not only that, not only was it easier, it opened up a whole world of possibilities that I didn't even know existed. So I spent a lot of time from then on out kind of practicing that. And it was not that long after that I got the Batman job. And that's where I really went to town in my publishing, in my published work. That's where I really discovered it. And so it's been awesome ever since. So these marks, I'm trying to give it, they're all kind of the same mark. They're all kind of tell me fabric. But on the skin, I'm going to make them different. So hopefully you read different textural stuff. I've been avoiding the head because my brush hasn't been exactly where I want it. Or I should say, it's not my brush, it's me. I haven't felt warmed up enough yet. And now I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm getting a pretty cool dry brush line on that. Excuse me. All this talking. So, yeah, let's get the contour of this face down. I mean, what's nice about Mignola is his work is so sculptural that, I mean, there's a real understanding of the geometric planes. And when I say sculptural, I just mean that you can see everything looks like a wedge, a three-dimensional wedge, a geometrical wedge, one side facing light, the other side in shadow. And it gives his work such a great three-dimensional quality. So it allows me to handle the shadows with some variety and value because they're so expertly constructed and placed. Now, the other thing about Hellboy is when you're drawing Hellboy, and this is a mistake people make a lot, and I'm not drawing Hellboy, I'm just inking him, is that jaw, his mouth, has to be handled with turning a blind eye to anatomy. It has to be, I think of it more like a Muppet mouth. I think when people draw like real lips, or they give his mouth like, creases over here, and it doesn't go from side to side, it just doesn't look like Hellboy. Alright, now Hellboy's got some of his, well, I'll get there. Let me do the bottom side of the jaw. Alright, so in that bottom part of the jaw, you can see that, yes, he has some chin hair in here, and then some shadowing. Now, I think Mignola would probably just black that all out. I'm going to attempt to keep the hair black and render the shadow in a value a little lighter than black. And I'll do that by using some like hatch work. So let's go into here. So if this is his chin hair, I'm going to try to construct a shape out of that. Let's black that in and see what that looks like. And again, this might be a different type of podcast. I've done a few with sped up inking, and then I've talked over it. But I've just launched my Inkpulp Instruction, so I'm thinking about everything I'm doing through sort of a teacher's lens. And I think those are easier to maybe watch, but I think harder to learn from. So I'm wondering if this way will be easier to learn from. And maybe kind of give you all a little bit of an idea of what I am like as a teacher and what Inkpulp Instruction will be like. At least the first episode, because most of the episodes will be with guests. So here we're getting into his sort of mutton chops, which is hair again, and I've established the logic of my inking here for his hair to be solid black. So, Mignola doesn't pencil with precision. There's like to go in and give a lot of hair texture into these sideburns, I think would do a disservice to the drawing. I think it would not be from Mignola's DNA, and I do think when you're inking someone else, you really do want to think about their work and keeping their DNA very, very apparent. I don't want this to look like a Hellboy drawing I did or someone else drew. It should look like Mignola, but it should look like it was handled in a way that maybe I can bring something different to it while still maintaining the DNA of Mike Mignola. So I guess that's my goal, if I were to say. So far, I think we're doing good. Like here, there's some rounded form here, so I do highly encourage you all to practice making circles with a brush and maintaining a steady line weight like that. It's nice. All right, so let's keep going. The eyes I'm going to outline with a thick black line because, again, I think most of the shadow work I'm going to do with like some rendering techniques. So the solid black areas will really serve a purpose. Although that'll run into a trap over there because that eye's in shadow. So maybe I'll fade the black as we go down the face. And then here's some anatomy I'm describing. And normally I'd probably use some of these techniques in the anatomy, but I don't want to do that because I've already established the logic of what I'm trying to achieve here. And Mignola is unlike any other artist I'm aware of. So if I create a logic to follow, I gotta follow it. If I disrupt it, I'll mess everything up. So these little flick feather marks, I love how they look, how they fade, how they go from thick to thin. At the same time, the mark dries out from black to broken to disappearing. So it's like you get this double effect of a feather fading from dark to light. You get the thick to thin and the black to the actual white of the paper. All right, that looks pretty cool. All right, so like I said here, I'm gonna try to at least think of the core part of the shadow, maybe in some real black way, and then as I get away from it, I can break it a little bit like I did right there. Yeah, and then continue that on, so you can see I went from thicker hatch marks here to thinner ones up there, kind of fading that shadow out. And I'm really guessing as I go right here. This is kind of the fun zone of inking. It's also the nerve-wracking zone. And this normally wouldn't be nerve-wracking, but I'm filming it. I'm exposing myself to all of you. But I've got a plan, so I should be okay. It's allowing me to get some marks in here that are, I believe, uniquely mine. I think I've gotten to a point in my inking where my mark making is pretty unique to me. I mean, it used to be you could see my influences on my sleeve. But now I think I've hit a point where I've started seeing the world in the way I draw, which is a nice place to be. A little dry brush fade up in there. That looks pretty cool. I'm kind of digging that. I'm sure the most common question I tend to get when it comes to inking with a brush is, how do you get such control? And I don't know that that should be a goal of anyone's. This is, I mean, I have tried to not be controlled. It's my nature. And I don't think being controlled is necessarily a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think what you have to do is just be very true to your natural way of working. So what I would recommend with a brush is just spend a lot of time working with it. And I also think life drawing with it, like just getting out there and doing some observational drawing with the brush with no pencil can really open up your understanding of how you use a brush as an individual. And also Um, build some confidence with it. It's really a kind of hard exercise at first to just draw with a brush with no pencil under it. But the more you do it, then you'll get a feel for the brush, and then you go back to pencil, and it's like when you have pencil under it, it's like, oh, okay, I'm in a lot more control than I thought I was. All right, so here I'm kind of, as I'm getting to the top, I am just trying to fade some shit out and do some cross hatching maybe in here too. This is getting into a realm of Mignola's work that you don't typically see where you're rendering a bit, but I feel like it will create a something interesting. Yeah, I think it just creates some subtlety there. It does make me think of when Kevin Nolan inked Mignola on that Alien Salvation book. Because there were moments where Nolan did his thing. He maintained the DNA of Mike Mignola 100%, but he found ways to go in and kind of do his rendering techniques. And obviously I come from the Kevin Nolan school of inking. So it's no surprise that I would be trying to do something in that vein, but do it my way. So here I am. Bringing in some solid blacks. And again, I feel like it has to be solid black up there because his eye is completely in shadow. And if I were to render that out, where if there was any light penetrating that shadow, bet your ass you'd see an eye. So if I'm not going to show the eye at all, I think it would only make sense for me to do it with using pure black in that zone. So now I'm going to, as I come down, I'm going to try some stuff. I'm going to try to render a bit. And so I want to go from these pitch black areas. Maybe I'll follow his direction of his pencil where it looks like things are almost chiseled in stone. Okay. I'm fading out. So my marks are getting thinner as I get away from that solid black area. Maybe I need a little more of a core shadow in here with a dry brush edge. All right, that's kind of cool. Now I think what I'll do is I'll fade some of these hatch lines in so they're not so perfectly lined up on the edge. Like that. And then on the other side, I'll do the same thing. So it blends. I think it blends and fades a little better that way. I think, honestly, right there, I could use some dry brush. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're getting even further away. And this is the tricky part, because I just dipped in to the inkwell. That means I'm a little wet. But no, I'm perfect, actually. You know, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember. I mean, it feels pretty normal, but I'm pretty sure that when you're inking over a blue line, it's a little easier to stay dry. I think the printer ink helps you stay dry. I think, I can't say for sure, but here I am, chiseling away. So, you know, I want to capture that that chiseled in stone look, like that African sculpture look, if you will. Now I'm working on hair, and therefore it's gonna have to be solid black. I think on his chin you can see what I'm talking about, where the hair separates from the shadow in here, and I think that worked. I think that worked pretty well. Here we've got a bit of anatomy, and I so want to use that technique I did on the fabric, but it just wouldn't make sense. While I got a really dry brush, I'm going to come down here so I can do a really thin, dry line. Thinner lines are hard to keep dry. All right. Now we're getting into the sculptural elements of it. I think after this bit of anatomy, I'm going to have to get that jacket figured out so it can inform me on what to do next. I think here it's okay to have a little bit of a solid black patch. I mean, it kind of follows the design of the blacks. They're kind of existing in the same spatial area of the picture plane. Yeah, let me come down the jacket. This is his other arm. Now that we're going inside, I got a little thinner here, a little thicker there. Containment line contour stuff. Again, that is a lesson directly from my first Inkpulp Instruction video, which you can purchase right now on my Indiegogo. Link is in the description below. It's also in the banner of my YouTube page. There's a little red GO. You can click on that. Yes, I twirl my paper a lot. I've said before, inking for me is very much a game of angles. I'm usually pulling lines, and I want to angle the paper so that I can pull in directions that are the most comfortable to me. So what I did right there is I made some parallel lines because I know this like Adam's apple area of the anatomy. I am definitely going to want some light in there, and the shadow on this side of the jacket will be black. So I'm going to show you how I do that. It's the same thing I did kind of up here, how I faded that. Now my brush is a little too wet for these. It's okay. Looks okay. Yeah, that works. I'll do the same thing down here. Wunderbar. Alright, so now we can get some solid blacks in, and I can work a little wetter. I know when I get down into here, I'm going to be doing a lot of like chisel stuff, so right up in here, I do want some blacks. A lot of times when an angle like that isn't cut hard enough, I will go back over it and try to cut it in the direction I want. I also think what's good about this is this black that I'm dropping in now pops out that area of the chin. So now what I'm going to do is surround the parallel hatch lines with black. Now I'm going to fade them into the black, and it should look a little bit of light creeping into that part of the stone. Just like that. That's a technique I love. I fucking love that. Alright, I can see over here we've got some cast shadow. I don't want that to be confused with the anatomy, which I'm going to chisel at. So, when in doubt, you know the rest, right? Black it out. The great Wally Wood. And if I just said Wally Wood, and you don't know who I'm talking about, Google that motherfucker. I mean, I hope you all know. He's really one of the greats of the comic book medium. And I would hope that we all know who he is. I think I want to, do that fabric textural mark making thing I kind of established. Yeah. Now I've got a thin seam line. So let's keep it thin. Cool. Here we've got some real faint textual marks. Now what you're going to see me do right now is, because my ink is so dry, that as I pull with the brush across the paper, the ink pulls out of it. But it's so thick, it forms a little tail, like an extra hair on the brush. So every now and then I just got to remove that, because it's getting in the way. Alright, we are getting near the end of this. This went pretty quickly. It's going to take some time to render out the torso anatomy. But, again, these are anatomical marks. I'm making them look like divots in stone, which is what I feel like they should look like. Here is a pectoral muscle. So I'm going to use that edge to define that. And then I'm going to come in with some big dry brush marks and start to render out that stone-like form. I feel like if I was to trace the outside of the shadow shape, it would just flatten out what I'm hoping to achieve, which is something that's been chiseled at with a hammer in stone. So we'll see. So far, I think it looks pretty cool. Now let's transition that down. So let's get up in here. And I think by keeping all the solid blacks up in this area, it's going to give a lot of weight into there, and that will help me achieve a real focal point to this piece. I think that's important. I didn't talk about that from the beginning, but I mean, usually in a bust or portrait situation, you want the eye to linger around the face of the character. So a lot more solid blacks up in here, and as we get down, we'll fade away from it. It'll be like, think of a camera using like focus. You get a focus here, and as we get away, like a blur. So a really short depth of field, maybe, if you're talking in camera terms. So let me get really wet, because I'm going to work my way down with these marks, but I don't want them to be totally dry yet. I just want them, as we go down, to dry out. Also, be aware, I'm using a very thick ink right now. Like I said, I'm at the bottom of my jar, and that means the ink's going to take a little longer to dry, so I want to be very aware of that, where my wet spots are. So now these lines are getting close to that in thickness, which is good, and in dryness, which is exactly what I want. I do think I need to beef up this contour line here, since we are letting light creep into that shadow. Okay, and now we're getting drier, so that's good. And I'm really trying to follow the grooves of his pencil mark making, because I just feel like I mean, I know he knows what the fuck he's doing, and I want to learn from that by inking it, but I want to maintain that DNA. And so by following those marks, I think I'll be more successful in achieving that stone-like look. That chiseled stone, I should say. Here we go. Kind of neat. See, now I need to get more ink in my brush, but I really gotta keep it dry. But I'm working with such thin lines at this point, I should be okay. You know, I feel like Topi would have done, well, Topi would have definitely done a much better job. I guess I'm trying to, I didn't know it at first, but now I'm realizing I think I'm trying to channel some Topi. So that kind of is the effect, I guess. Just got this buttonhole to get in. Oh, I see here he's done some fade work. So I want to capitalize on that without bringing too much attention to it. Like that. And for the signature, I'm going to switch my tool. No, maybe not. Maybe we should just keep the DNA of the dry brush here. Because if I use a pen, I think it's going to get too black. Inking signatures is a whole other thing. I'm not great at that part of it. I'm trying. Because there's just something about an artist's handwriting that is just so uniquely theirs. Just really trying to make it look like Mignola signed this. And then I'll sign my name next to it, I guess. Boom. And if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to get my obnoxious thing. got my stamp. My good old Inkpulp stamp. And I like putting that on my work. I've got our archival stamp pad. So I know that's good. Don't got to worry about it too much, and then I can just whap. Booyah. And that's it, man. I'll get a scan up here for you all. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something today. I hope you'll be interested in Inkpulp Instruction now if you weren't before. And I hope you want to see more of these because I enjoy doing it and I'll probably do more. Thanks for listening.
This is the Inkpulp Podcast. This is the Inkpulp Podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.